Hey everybody, the purpose of this video is to kind of introduce this spreadsheet to you to make sure you know what you're looking at. So we're going to use Advil for the most part, at least in this video. I'm still writing the questions, so we might bring in some other types of medications as well. But for right now, we'll just look at Advil. So the idea here is you're looking, like we did in class, you're looking at the amount of acetaminophen. No, is that right? Ibuprofen, excuse me, Advil, in your body after you take a certain amount and let it sit there. So I think this is actually wrong. Let me change it real quick. The half-life of Advil is actually 2 hours. We Googled that in class. So what you're seeing here is if you start with 800 milligrams, just I threw that number in for a placeholder. So at the beginning you have 800 milligrams. 2 hours later, half of it's gone. And this is the kind of the pattern it falls through that 2 hours. 2 hours after that, half more is gone. So it went from 800 to 400, then 400 to 200, 200 to 100. Every 2 hours it halves again. 100 to 50, 50 to 25, and so forth and so on. And we had some fun with this in class. We proved that you never actually get rid of all of the Advil in your body, because you don't. I mean, you don't. There's always a little bit there. Now, whether that little bit is meaningful, well, that's for the doctors to argue about. But a question came up in Redmond, because we were talking about this when I was streaming back from Redmond. What would it look like if, or what would the equation look like if you were to take a second dose or a third dose or multiple doses? So what we're going to do here is look at that. So you've got the half-life of the drug at 2 hours. We're going to start with 800 milligrams. That's all good. When should you take your next dose? Well, I'm just going to throw a number. 3 hours. We'll just throw 3 hours in there. Okay, now that doesn't change anything yet, because right now Excel thinks you only took that first dose. But what we're going to do is we're going to click this box right here for second dose. Now, when that happens, what you're going to see is it's going to show you what happens to the Advil in your body after 3 hours when you take that next dose. So at 800, that's at the beginning. It starts doing its little halving, and you might recognize that it gets down to about where it should get down to. It should get down to that 400, and then it pops up when you take that next dose at 3 hours, and then it begins fading again. Okay, and that's exactly what should happen. You take a little bit more the Advil, and then it increases the drug in your system. I do want to say there is a little bit of fiction here, depending on how fast the Advil metabolizes. It doesn't automatically at 3 hours pop up 800 milligrams more. It doesn't work exactly like that, but it's different for every person, so I'm just going to assume that we get the drug into our system as quickly as possible. Okay? What if you take a third dose? If you take a third dose, it's going to look something like that. How about a fourth dose? Whoops. There we go, fourth dose. How about a fifth? And how about a sixth? And it's kind of neat. I mean, you're actually seeing how these unchecked third, excuse me. There we go. You're actually seeing how these dosages kind of deal with each other through the course of a day. I've only looked at this through the course of a day, and I've capped it at 6 doses because I read the Advil label and it says take no more than 6 tablets in 24 hours. I'm sure there's also warnings about the milligrams within the tablet. I'm kind of leaving that for you to make sure you read before you take Advil or any other drug, and make sure, obviously, I don't want to sound like a freaking commercial here, but I'm just looking at the math. So what you might notice here is if the half-life of a drug is 2 hours and you're taking 800 repeatedly, you might notice what's actually kind of going on with these peaks. They're kind of marching like that, and then here's your perfect half-life disappearing, and then you still got that little bit of drug left over. Now, what's fun about this is you can change any of this stuff. I'm going to leave the half-life at 2 hours because that's what Advil is. But if you start with 1,000, it's just going to make the graph, it looks exactly the same, which hopefully that makes sense because it's all exponential, which means it's all multiplication. So it's not going to change. We could take 2,000, don't actually do this, but you could do 2,000 milligrams and it's going to look exactly the same. So I'm going to go back to a sensible amount, which was that original 800 or whatever. And what's really fun is if you mess with the taking the next dose after, say 3 hours, you change it to 4 hours. What's that going to look like? Now look at the difference in the shape. Look at the difference in the shape between that and that. And it's just so cool. Like when I was building this spreadsheet, and if you're interested in what it looks like, if you pull this graph off to the side, that's where everything's happening. And it's actually a super fun little set of functions I had to build. You're not responsible for it. My original thought was to actually get you into coding this, but as I started doing it, I'm like, there's just no way in hell. It's too crazy. But it's not crazy. It's not so crazy that you can't do this yourself. So what I'm going to be asking you to do throughout this problem is just changing these. That's a fun one, right? If you take all 6 doses an hour apart, which essentially means you're taking it at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. you get your Advil to pop up there to a ridiculous level, almost 2,500 milligrams before it then fades off. So I'm going to be asking you to kind of mess around with this, and as I'm writing the question, I might also have you mess with this toxic level. I put that in. I'm not sure about it yet. I might have you mess with it. I'm not sure. I might also have you look at something a little more nefarious than Advil. Maybe something like, I'm trying to think, like codeine, which is sometimes what they put in prescription Advil. I know when I had my hernia surgery 20 years ago now, I was given a prescription of Tylenol with codeine, and I took one of them and woke up 4 days later. It just totally put me on my butt. So I might have you look at codeine or something along those lines, and we'll look at toxicity and things like that. But this is just kind of an exploration of what's going on with drugs in your body. So I want to thank Samantha. I think it was you that brought this up. It's kind of a really cool math problem, which I've never considered before. So that's why I always say I learn a ton from listening to y'all. All right. Hope that's enough to get you started. Let me go write the rest of this question, and we'll talk to you soon.